Welcome back to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation.
Today, we're going to be exploring a case that is, I think, just deeply perplexing. It's one of those mysteries that the more you look at the facts, the less sense it seems to make.
Exactly. We're talking about the disappearance of Tiffany Daniels from Pensacola, Florida, back in August of 2013.
And this case is really the definition of a paradox. You have what seems like a very ordinary event. A young woman, she's 25 years old, she tells her boss she needs a few days off. Pretty normal stuff.
Totally normal. But then she just vanishes. And a little over a week later, her car turns up, abandoned in a parking lot by the beach.
And inside that car is everything she would need to function in the world. Her wallet, her cell phone, cash, her keys, even her bicycle.
The very instruments of life. And they're just left there. It gives you this very clear physical endpoint to her journey. You know, her car is here, but it tells you absolutely nothing about how or why she disappeared.
Right. The evidence only deepens the mystery. It's a timeline that's just shattered into pieces, and the pieces don't fit together.
So that's what we want to do today. We're going to walk through that fragmented timeline, really examine the evidence they found in her car, and then sort through the major theories that have kept this case alive for over a decade.
From, a tragic accident all the way to something far more sinister like abduction, especially now that new forensic technology is being brought into the picture.
Yeah, we're going to look at all the source material that's out there and try to make sense of the threads. Okay, so to really understand any missing person case, you have to start with the person. Who was Tiffany Daniels?
Well, she was born in Dallas in 1988, but by 2013, she'd really built a life for herself in Pensacola. And everyone who knew her described her in similar terms. She was free-spirited, very outgoing, creative.
An artist, right. She was a theater technician at Pensacola State College. She painted these intricate, beautiful sets for their productions.
Yeah, and she was really embedded in the local culture there. She wasn't just a passive participant. She was an organizer. She put together blues and swing dance parties. So she had this really vibrant social side.
But she also had this other side, a quieter one. She loved nature, spent a lot of time hiking and biking alone in the dunes of the Gulf Islands National Seashore.
And that detail, her biking in the dunes, becomes incredibly important later on.
Absolutely. And there are two other really specific personal habits we have to mention because they become central to one of the biggest theories in this case.
Okay.
First, her diet. She was a strict pescatarian, so she would only eat fish or vegetable-based foods. She was very particular about checking, say, if the soup broth was made with chicken stock.
Mm-hmm. A very specific dietary habit.
A very specific detail. Second, she had these really distinctive tattoos on the tops of her feet showing a plant growing and then blooming. Very visible marks.
Got it. So beyond her personality, her background is also, well, it's complex. She was a very high-achieving student. She had gone through the International Baccalaureate program in high school, which is incredibly rigorous.
It's a huge pressure cooker. And that's often brought up in online discussions, the idea of the quarter-life crisis, this burnout that can hit really high-achieving people in their mid-20s when all that academic structure suddenly falls away.
And there's this other detail, a really sensitive one that pops up in some of the source material. An internship she supposedly had with some kind of connection to military intelligence, maybe the NSA.
That one is. It's explosive, isn't it? As soon as you hear that, your mind just goes to a million different places.
It does. And for the online community, that became a huge point of speculation.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, law enforcement sources seem to have looked into it and dismissed it pretty quickly. They don't see it as a factor.
But its mere existence kind of forces you to consider these other scenarios, right? Like surveillance or secrecy. You have to at least rule it out.
You absolutely have to. Okay, but let's bring it back to the days immediately before she disappeared. August 11th, 2013, the day before she vanishes.
Right. She has a farewell breakfast with her boyfriend. He was moving to Austin, Texas to start a graduate program in robotics.
And she had decided not to go with him, to stay in Pensacola. And sources say this left her feeling, slightly depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to be careful with that word.
Exactly. This wasn't a huge dramatic breakup. They had plans. She was going to visit him in Austin. She was already organizing a dance party for 2 weeks from then. It was sadness about a separation, not a sign of some deep, crushing despair.
It doesn't point to someone planning to just check out of their own life.
No. But there were other pressures. Very real ones. The sources are pretty clear about financial strain.
Yeah, this is a big one. Her parents had noticed this pattern where she would end up covering rent for her roommates when they couldn't or, wouldn't pay.
And it had reached a critical point. The electricity in her house was actually shut off right after she disappeared because the bill hadn't been paid. That's a serious, immediate stressor.
It really is. And that financial vulnerability, it kind of sets the stage for her living situation at the time. She'd just taken on a new housemate, a man named Gary Nichols.
He was 54, so quite a bit older. He was the father of one of her friends and was going through a separation.
Her parents were, understandably, a little uneasy about the age gap. But he seemed stable, he could pay his share of the rent, and they had some common interests, like cycling.
And he becomes a key figure because he's in the house during some of those critical last hours.
So let's build that timeline for Monday, August 12th. It starts really early. Around 5 a.m., Nichols says he heard the front door opening and closing several times.
Which her parents said was really weird for her. She wasn't an early riser.
No, he didn't see her, just heard the door.
Yeah.
So right away, you have this strange, unexplained activity. Is she nervous? Is she meeting someone secretly? We don't know.
Then, at 7 a.m., Nichols leaves for his own job. And when he leaves, her car, a gray 1999 Toyota 4Runner, is already gone.
But then she shows up for her shift at the college on time. So whatever that 5 a.m. activity was, it didn't stop her from going about a seemingly normal day.
Until the afternoon. At 4:43 p.m., everything changes.
This is the moment. She goes to her supervisor and asks to leave early. And she tells him she's taking some time off, possibly the whole week.
And the reason she gives is this incredibly cryptic phrase. She had things she had to take care of.
That phrase, it hangs over this entire case. It implies something urgent, something necessary, maybe something private. But she offered no explanation to anyone. Not her friends, not her family.
And this is where we hit our first major blind spot, a gap of about 3 hours.
Police determined that after she left work, she did go home for a short time. This would have been somewhere between, say, 5 o'clock and 7:30.
And her roommate, Gary Nichols, was there. But he was in his room on a phone call. He says he never saw or heard her come in.
Tiffany's mother was really skeptical about that. How could he not have noticed her in the house? But police investigated him thoroughly. He passed polygraphs, and they found no reason to suspect him of foul play. In fact, he was the one who first raised the alarm when she didn't show up for work later that week.
Okay, so she's home briefly, but unseen. Then what?
Then we get the last confirmed piece of evidence from that day. At 7:51 p.m., a security camera at the Bob Sykes Bridge toll booth catches her 4Runner.
Right. It's crossing over onto Santa Rosa Island, heading towards Pensacola Beach.
So that places her vehicle, at least, heading towards this isolated part of the island. And it's almost 3 hours after she clocked out of work.
That 3-hour window is a complete mystery. She went home. Okay, but what else did she do? Was she meeting someone about her money problems? Was she just driving around?
And here's the most critical part. The camera only got a clear shot of the license plate. You can't see who's driving.
Oh.
So was it Tiffany at the wheel, heading out for a spontaneous trip to the beach? Or was someone else already in control of her car? That one unanswerable question really sets the stage for everything that comes next. The discovery of the vehicle is what really locks this case into place as a total enigma. Tiffany wasn't even reported missing until the end of that week when she didn't come back to work.
It's a long delay.
A very long delay. And then on August 20th, so 8 days after she was last seen crossing that bridge, a jogger sees her 4Runner.
And the jogger was a family friend of all people. Just a terrible coincidence.
A terrible but lucky coincidence. The car might have sat there even longer otherwise, and the location is just so significant.
It was in the Park West parking lot near Fort Pickens. This is on the far western tip of Santa Rosa Island. Pretty remote area.
And it was one of Tiffany's spots. We mentioned she loved hiking and biking out there at the Gulf Islands National Seashore. But her mother had specifically warned her about going there alone, especially after dark.
But the way the car was parked, that was strange, wasn't it?
Very strange. It was parked facing oncoming traffic, which is just odd. And it was in a part of a lot that was sort of reserved for wildlife services, not for regular visitors. It doesn't look like a normal parking job.
No, it feels hasty.
Right.
Or staged. Something is off about it.
And then you get to the contents of the car, And the confusion just multiplies. It seems to contradict every possible theory.
Okay, so what did they find inside?
They found her bicycle, a specialized one, and the tires were covered in sand. They found her cell phone. They found her purse, and inside the purse was her wallet with all her cash and her credit cards.
Wow.
They also found some clothes, some of her professional paintings from work, a big jug of water, and a jar of peanut butter.
Okay, let's unpack that for a second. The water and the peanut butter. That sounds like someone was planning a little trip, right? A hike, a picnic, maybe camping out for a bit.
It suggests preparation for something, a short-term need at least,
Yeah.
a long bike ride maybe, and the sand on the bike tires supports that. It suggests the bike was recently used on the dunes.
But then you have the wallet, the cash, the phone. If you're running away to start a new life, that's the first thing you take.
Exactly. And if you're planning a tragic accident, you might leave them behind, sure, but why bring provisions like water and peanut butter? It's this bizarre mix of things you'd abandon and things you'd take.
It makes no sense. The two sets of items tell completely different stories.
They do. It's a stark contradiction. And it leads us right to the witness reports, which are just as complicated.
The first reports were pretty vague, right? Some vacationers who thought they saw a man getting out of the car the day it was found.
Right. Not much to go on there. But then 2 years later, a much more specific witness came forward.
2 years is a long time to wait.
It is, but their memory was very clear. This person reported seeing something on August 19th. That's the day before the jogger found the car.
Okay.
They saw a white male, maybe in his 30s, wearing nothing but red shorts, standing at the back of the 4Runner with the tailgate wide open.
The man in red shorts. He feels like our only real person of interest here.
He is. And the tailgate being up is such a key detail. What was he doing? Was he taking something out of the car? Was he putting something in? Was he searching it? Or was he preparing the scene?
And if he was with the car on the 19th, that means the car wasn't just sitting there abandoned for the full 8 days. Something was happening with it right before it was found.
Precisely. And that brings us to the physical evidence from the car itself, which at first seemed like a huge break.
The fingerprints.
The fingerprints. Investigators lifted 2 clear, distinct prints from the vehicle. They didn't match Tiffany, her family, her boyfriend, anyone they knew.
And where were they found?
One was on the passenger door handle. And critically, the other one was on the steering wheel.
The steering wheel. That's huge. That almost has to be the driver.
It strongly suggests that whoever left that print either drove the car or was in the driver's seat very recently. But here's the problem. The forensic stalemate, as they call it.
They ran the prints through the databases.
They ran them through every national and state database.
Yeah.
AFIS. No hits. Nothing.
So the person who left those prints has no criminal record, or at least no record that required fingerprinting.
Exactly. It could be a first-time offender. It could be someone who has just never been in the system. So you have this solid piece of physical proof, a fingerprint, but it leads nowhere. It's like having a key with no lock.
Just a dead end. But that's not where the forensic story ends, is it? We're hearing about new developments even all these years later.
That's right. The Pensacola Police Department, to their immense credit, held on to that 4Runner. It's been kept in a climate-controlled impound lot for over a decade.
Wow.
And now, with updates coming out in late 2025, they're re-examining it using technology that just didn't exist in 2013.
They're using something called an MVAC system, right? What exactly is that?
So think of it like a highly sophisticated forensic-grade wet vacuum. Standard DNA swabbing is often not great on porous surfaces like car seats or rough surfaces like bike tires, especially after so many years. The MVAC system sprays a sterile solution onto the surface and then immediately vacuums it back up. That process can pull out tiny skin cells, what we call touch DNA, that have been trapped deep in the fabric fibers or the crevices of an object for years.
So it's literally washing the evidence and collecting the runoff.
That's a great way to put it. And it's a potential game changer for cold cases. They're hoping to get a full DNA profile from the steering wheel, the car seat, maybe even the bicycle's handlebars.
And even if that DNA profile doesn't match anyone in the database today,
It'll be there waiting. If that person is ever arrested for anything in the future, they'll get a hit. It's an investment in a future answer.
Okay, so with all this contradictory evidence, you inevitably get conflicting theories, and they really fall into 2 big camps, right? accidental death or foul play.
Exactly. Let's start with the simplest, least sinister explanation, the accidental drowning theory.
This one makes sense on the surface. The car is at the beach. The bike has sand on the tires. The idea is she went for a bike ride, then decided to go for a swim, and something went wrong.
And there's that one romantic detail that seems to support it. A friend pointed out that the Perseid meteor shower was peaking that week. Tiffany, being this artistic, free-spirited person, might have gone to the beach to watch it.
It's a plausible motive, but there's a huge problem with the drowning theory.
A huge one. Detective Harnett, one of the lead investigators, made this point very clearly. In that specific part of the Gulf, the currents are such that if someone drowns, their body almost always washes ashore within a few days.
And they searched extensively.
Exhaustively. The National Park Service, volunteer groups, they found nothing. For a body to simply vanish in that area is extremely unlikely.
Okay, so that really undermines the accident theory. What about a voluntary disappearance? Suicide or just running away?
This is an angle the online communities have really explored. They point to the pressure of her past academic achievements. It's the so-called quarter-life crisis, combined with the emotional stress of her boyfriend leaving and the very real financial strain.
The idea that it all just became too much.
Right. But again, the evidence we have seems to argue against that. She had concrete, near-future plans. The trip to Austin, the dance party she was organizing.
Her tent was still at home, too, so if she was planning some kind of extended trip to go off-grid, she left a key piece of gear behind.
And the most objective piece of evidence against the running away theory is the financial one. Investigators looked at her accounts. There were no large withdrawals, no signs of her liquidating her assets to fund a new life. Whatever happened, it seems to have been very sudden.
Which pushes us pretty firmly into the foul play category. And this is where the family's primary belief comes in, the human trafficking theory.
Right. This is often called the I-10 threat because it centers on a potential sighting that happened along Interstate 10.
This was in Louisiana, wasn't it? A few months after she disappeared.
Yeah, January 2014, so about 5 months later, a waitress in Metairie, Louisiana, which is just outside New Orleans, saw a woman she was convinced was Tiffany.
And she wasn't alone.
No. She was with 2 other women. One was younger, and one was an older woman, possibly Latina, who seemed to be in charge. Better dressed, did all the talking.
And the behavior of the 2 younger women was what caught the waitress's attention.
It was very strange. They were both wearing long-sleeve shirts. Even though it was a warm day, they wouldn't make eye contact. And the older woman controlled the entire interaction. The waitress said when she mentioned the missing person case, the 3 of them just got up and left abruptly.
But the reason the sighting became so crucial for Tiffany's family, it comes down to 2 tiny, incredibly personal details.
This is what makes it so compelling. First, the waitress said the woman who looked like Tiffany kept pulling her sleeves down over her hands.
And the family confirmed.
They confirmed that was a lifelong nervous habit of Tiffany's, something she did when she was cold or anxious or uncomfortable.
Wow.
And then the second detail. The woman asked the waitress about the soup of the day, specifically asking if the broth was made with chicken stock. She needed to verify it was a fish or vegetable broth.
Which is perfectly consistent with her pescatarian diet.
Perfectly. And for the family, those 2 details were basically proof. How could an imposter know to do both of those very specific, very personal things, the nervous tadic and the dietary question?
That's a powerful combination. It's easy to see why they believe it was her.
It is, and this sighting is what led them to believe she was abducted and moved along I-10, which is known as a major corridor for human trafficking. And Florida, unfortunately, has one of the highest rates of trafficking in the country.
But law enforcement's take on this is a bit different.
It is. Detective Harnett has said that while they can't rule it out, they have 0 physical evidence to support the trafficking theory. No pings from her phone, no credit card activity, nothing to track her movements to Louisiana.
And this is where you get this really interesting and I think necessary public debate about the theory itself.
Right. There's a critique, you see it a lot in online forums, that questions why human trafficking often becomes the default theory when a young white woman with a strong support system goes missing.
They call it a cultural bogeyman.
Exactly. The argument is that traffickers typically prey on the most vulnerable and marginalized people in society. Runaways, the homeless, people with addiction issues. whose disappearances often go unnoticed for long periods. Tiffany doesn't fit that profile.
But there's a counter argument to that critique too, isn't there?
There is. It acknowledges that while Tiffany had a great support system, her personality might have made her vulnerable in other ways. She was described as very trusting, very open to meeting new people. She used Craigslist to find a roommate. She was in financial distress.
So she could have been susceptible to a more sophisticated kind of grooming or deception, rather than just a random abduction off the street.
That's the idea, that her trusting nature and her financial problems could have been exploited by someone who lured her into a dangerous situation.
So let's try to synthesize all of this, because the ambiguity is really the heart of the case, isn't it? We have to go back to that 7-day gap.
That is the black hole in this case.
Yeah.
The time between her car crossing the bridge on the evening of the 12th and the man in red shorts being seen with the car on the 19th. A full week.
So if she was abducted on the 12th, what was the abductor doing with her car for 7 days? Why hold on to it for so long?
And why dump it in a location that was so personal to Tiffany, a place she was known to frequent? It's a very strange choice if you're trying to cover your tracks.
Unless you're trying to send a message or create a false narrative.
Exactly. If the man in red shorts was staging the scene on the 19th or 20th, what was the goal? To make it look like a hiking or swimming accident.
But then we're back to the same contradiction. If you're staging an accident, why leave the wallet, the phone, the cash? A thief would take those. A killer would get rid of them.
It just doesn't add up. The only way leaving those items makes sense is if the person's goal was specifically to make it look like Tiffany just wandered off from her car to go for a bike ride or a swim, and they didn't care about the valuables at all.
Because the valuables themselves supported that story. They showed she wasn't robbed.
Precisely. And that brings us back to that phrase, things she had to take care of.
It's the key, isn't it? Was it a cryptic reference to her money problems? Did she set up some kind of secret meeting to borrow money or maybe sell something and it went horribly wrong?
That's one line of speculation. Another, much more private one that has been discussed online is the possibility of an unplanned pregnancy, and that her time off was for a secret out-of-town procedure. But again, there is absolutely no evidence for that. It's pure speculation born from the need to explain the secrecy.
And no matter what the secret was, the forensic reality is still the same. We have 2 fingerprints from a person who was in her car, who was touching the steering wheel, and who has never been identified.
And the fact that this person isn't in any criminal database is, in a way, its own kind of clue. It tells you something about who they might be, or rather who they're not.
It just underscores how fragile an investigation can be. You can have solid physical proof that a stranger drove your victim's car, but without a name attached, it's almost useless.
And that lack of a voluntary financial footprint, the fact that she didn't drain her bank account, that really cements the idea that whatever happened was sudden and not of her own design. She didn't pack up her life was taken from her.
And you see the toll of that ambiguity on her family. It's just immense. They're still chasing down tips more than 12 years later.
They are, following leads that have sent them looking for her in homeless communities in California or near illegal pot farms where trafficking victims are sometimes found. It's a relentless search.
The community in Pensacola hasn't given up either. There's a huge mural of her on the graffiti bridge there that gets updated, and they hold a vigil for her every single year.
The Light the Way vigil. And their focus has always been on the hope that she is still alive somewhere, being held against her will, which is a completely understandable position to take when every other explanation leads to a dead end.
The case of Tiffany Daniels really shows you that a mystery doesn't always come from a lack of evidence. Sometimes it comes from the evidence itself being completely contradictory.
You have the car, you have the provisions, you have the sand on the bike, you have the fingerprints, and they all point in different directions. One story says accident, another says it was staged, a third says abduction, and they can't all be true.
The threads of truth here are just so tangled, and the fact that after all this time, the biggest hope for a breakthrough still lies with new technology being used on old evidence. It tells you how close an answer might be, and yet how impossibly far away it's been for so long.
I want to leave you with the final thought, and it comes from that Louisiana sighting, the one the family holds on to so tightly. I want you to consider the power of those 2 tiny details, the pulled sleeves and the question about the soup. These aren't forensic data points like a fingerprint. They're human habits, quirks, Think about the incredible weight those tiny personal details can carry for a family, allowing them to sustain hope for over a decade, even when objective police evidence can't back it up. So the question is, what happens in an investigation when a personal habit becomes more persuasive than a forensic fact?
A truly challenging question. Join us next time on Threads of Truth as we examine the bizarre and unsettling case of Charles Morgan, a man who seemed to predict his own end.